Welcome to episode 112 of Beer with Strangers. I'm your host, Tony Russo, and I'm joined this week as I'm joined each week by...
Hi, Doug Griffith here from Extreme Brewing, and I'll give my normal weather report. Today, sunny and a wonderful day, probably lower 70s right now, but if you're not outside this week sometime, get out there because you don't know what the weather's going to be from now on.
Take advantage while you can.
Yes.
A couple things when we start. I don't know if any of you who are listening or who are watching follow us on our Facebook page, but if you go to the Shorecraft Beer Facebook page, each week before we start the show, Doug and I do a little bit of a tasting of one of the beers, or in this case, ciders, that they make here. So today
Cheers.
we're drinking which?
Cranberry apple cider. So a little on the tart side, but very refreshing.
It's very good. Fall beers are one thing, fall ciders are another. And something you mentioned earlier was people just running and picking up ciders and fermenting them. Do you want to talk a little bit about how?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing for getting ciders from the local fruit stand is to make sure they have no preservatives in them. Some places are required now by law to preserve them, which for us homebrewers is not a good thing. So by all means, when you go to get your apple cider, ask about, does it have a preservative in it? And it should be marked on the label if it's at a local fruit stand.
And why are preservatives bad for you guys?
Won't ferment.
Ah.
So you can't make cider if it's not going to ferment. If you still want to make cider, you can't find any local stuff. We do have cider kits, which is processed and concentrated apple juice in the kit form. So, but you should be able to find some around, or sometimes you have to ask for it and they'll get it in for you. So
I know that Atkins Farm Market on Mount Herman Road in Salisbury has the unpasteurized.
Well, pasteurized is fine. Pasteurization is just heating it to about 160 degrees. So that actually is a fine. Pasteurized juice is great. It's just
preserved.
It's preserved with usually potassium sorbate or sodium benzoate that they add to it so that it kills the yeast and prohibits fermentation. So
I feel like this is also doesn't have preservatives because they keep it in the refrigerator, and when we bought it, they said, are you going right home?
Yeah.
Because you don't want this
That's
sitting
probably
in the
either raw or pasteurized.
Yeah. So anyway, I enjoyed. I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this cider very much. It's easy to forget about cider, especially when you're super into beer. And a lot of the ciders that you can get in the store aren't great. They're a lot of times they're really sweet and a little sugary. But I guess more often we're going to get better ciders now. But it's coming with craft beer.
If you're getting it just from the grocery, it may not even be fermented. So
no, like if like the woodchuck.
Oh, okay,
the bottled alcoholic ciders. There are more selection now than there have been in a long time. And some of them are great.
But still, make it at home, and you can adjust that sweetness to whatever you want. So
and you just add yeast and wait.
That's generally it, or add. You can bump the alcohol up a little bit with an additional bit of sugar. So it's all personal preference.
And actually, let's start right with that because I didn't read this story because I knew that Doug would know enough about it.
The blow off tube, huh?
And so if you decide to ferment, this was a story. We're trying to talk more about homebrew stuff. So if you have homebrew questions, please go on and you can email them to us, or you can chat with us right online on Google Hangouts. We're keeping an eye out, which is something we weren't able to do on the last format. But anyway, yes, the blow-off tube. This was a story about whether, like, some people just like to use, and you generally use here the caps.
Yeah,
the blow-off tube is.
But the blow-off tube, the idea behind it is because you may have a very active fermentation, and it depends upon what your temperature is, what kind of yeast you use. Some yeast get more aggressive, especially if it's a little bit on the warm side. Fermentation itself will add a little extra heat to the wort as it's fermenting, and then the yeast gets more aggressive, and it may, if you're in a bucket, it may blow the lid off the top if it gets too aggressive. So hence the use of a carboy with a blow-off tube on top. I've even used the glass carboys that are about 1.25 inches or so in diameter, and use a huge big blow off tube, so that no matter what,
you don't have any trouble.
You don't have any trouble, right? Sometimes with even the caps, if you have a lot of hops involved, and the hops can get up to that cap and clog the hole on that cap, and then you've got something that's building pressure and you can blow that cap off. And I've not had that happen, but I've had buckets that have blown the top off, and it's been all over the ceiling.
Right.
So it can be quite messy. So, but main thing to prohibit that is a lower temperature fermentation, but sometimes you can't control it. You don't have a place to control it. So in something, whether it's a bucket or a carboy, helps to eliminate that possibility.
And for those of you who aren't familiar, what a blow-off tube is when the beer is fermenting, it bubbles and it foams and it forces air up. And when it's too much, this tube is connected to a smaller jar or with water in it.
Of course, effectively creates an airlock.
Right, to keep the bad stuff from getting in,
right,
and the good stuff or the
CO2 going out.
The CO2 going out. And that's how beer is carbonated. It's funny, I don't recall who, but somebody was just remarking about how surprised they were that not all beers needed to had CO2 out of it, that some beer just has carbonation in it from the process.
Some of the beer that's produced by most breweries, they do a naturally carbonated or bottle conditioned beer, which means they add a little bit of sugar of some sort, or if they can actually pull it off the fermentation tank at a specific time when they know how much sugar is left in it, bottle it, and then it becomes bottle conditioned. The bottle conditioning is where they put it in a bottle, cap it, and then fermentation finishes in the bottle. But it just has to be a very small fermentation that it's left. So most people or most breweries will do a still beer. In other words, it's a beer that has been fully has been fully fermented. They'll add a little bit of sugar and yeast even at bottling time, so they can control how much they're putting in there. And then it's just enough to do a small fermentation, which gives you enough carbonation in the bottle.
I had a friend who has a winery, and she had bottles that were starting to go, and so she because there was too much carbonation in them.
Yeah.
And so she had a sale, and I forget the premise of the sale was something like, if you can get it to the register before it explodes, it's half off or something. But it was kind of having fun with it because you could see the corks like working their way out.
It's a regular cork, and it was pushing the cork out.
Right. Yeah. It was funny to see. Other things. I'm apologizing in advance for how red my face is, but you saw how little cider I had. It's just I can feel look at me. I can feel how face my red gets.
So you compare
compared to the shirt. So next week, hopefully, we'll have the color controls back, and I'll be able to wash my face out, so we don't have to see how red it is. The other homebrew story.
So no more cider for you. Makes your face too red.
No. It's my. This is the upside is my face is never going to get any redder. So I could have like 5 more gallons of cider, and no one would be able to tell the difference. 1, 10, it all is the same to me. Want to talk a little bit about the homebrew competition. I had never been to one, like on the inside of one, and I got a chance to come. They had one. You guys ran it at the Good Beer Festival this year,
and that wasn't the best one to see because of all the interruptions we had early in the judging process because of the weather.
Yeah, the weather was awful. But I wrote a story about it. If you get a chance to look at it, the cool thing was that even people who didn't have to go out in the rain went out to help everybody get their tents down so that they could get back to the judging, which was cool thing number 1. But cool thing number 2 that I never realized, and I don't know if this is particular to yours or if this is what they always do, is first the judges do the scoring, and then they kind of talk about how they arrived at their numbers.
That's normal.
Yeah, just to kind of make sure that you're saying out loud, because I think that second step makes people pay even more attention to what they are scoring and why.
And usually you have more experienced judges. There was one very experienced judge in each group of 3. So they're kind of the ones who guide everybody else, because one or two of them had never had been in a homebrew contest, so it helps to. I mean, everybody there knew beer,
right? Everybody, and they knew how to taste, and they knew
right,
different flavors,
right, and they knew the styles,
right?
But we got people in the styles that they knew that or were familiar with, so that you're judging something that you know what should be tasting like,
right?
But some people had never actually been a judge, so the experienced judges were helping assist with the judging to a certain degree. But you get everybody to judge and write down their interpretations of what they're tasting, and then you talk about it, and you're just trying to agree on what your tastes are telling you. Some people have some people can't taste certain tastes.
Right.
That's just the way it is. And some people can, and that's the opportunity to just discuss what you are tasting. And sometimes it's just to agree that what you're tasting or what you the off flavors or the good flavors, you're in agreement as to what those tastes are. So, and sometimes the scores are adjusted accordingly because of that discussion.
Right. And I think that's cool, especially because one of the things that I think you guys are proud about for your competitions is that it's not a strict BJCP. It's not a strict official.
This was a BJCP sanctioned event.
Oh, okay.
American Homebrew, or through the BJCP is the judging part of the American Homebrewers Association.
I see.
And it was a AHA sanctioned registered event. We only had two judges there, a couple of them because of weather and things that happened. But those two judges did the most popular ones, and they actually did the final tasting on the Best of Show. So, I mean, you still utilize the judges, and it's a training, like I said before,
for the other people. But it also it's a chance for to talk about like the beer that tastes the best. So beers that weren't strictly to style could still do well in the. Like they got hurt for being not to style, but they still could do well if they tasted.
With the AHA BJCP sanctioned event, everybody had to state what style beer they were putting their beer into. So they get judged by what they say they're supposed to be judged against. I mean, you have to have something to judge against, and with a sanctioned event,
it's important.
It's important, yes. And
now, do the people who won, do they get the right to compete in something else, or do they get points? How does that work?
No, you don't get any points. You just get your beer judged, and the judges get to tell you what they thought of your beer. For those who win, it's good reinforcement that you're making good beer. For those who don't win, it's reinforcing what you can do to improve your beers. So,
I think I may have told you. Go ahead.
But the winners do get either monetary and or gift certificates. Some of which we give, some the county gives monetary. We give gift certificates just to reinforce those who participated. You get something for your efforts if you get the first, second, or third place.
And there were medals, right?
You got some medals to go to people, as well as the gift certificates and or monetary prizes.
One of the stories that I think I may have told before, but I'll tell it again just because it's relevant, was I knew a woman who was a cheesemaker, and she would enter cheese that she knew wasn't great to get feedback on what she could do when she was still learning how to make cheese. She would enter it to say, okay, I know this isn't what I'm looking for, but help me. Tell me where I'm short, and tell me where I'm succeeding so I can do better. Do a lot of people do that with beer?
Sometimes. I mean, I've heard of contests where somebody will enter something that they know is an issue so that the judges can
Tell them what they're doing wrong.
Or just to reinforce the judges picked up the problem beer. So, you know.
That's fun. And that one never occurred to me. But anyway, if we have any classes coming up, if you're interested in learning to brew, this is where to do it.
Not this month. We're back to classes in November. We're working on getting those set up right now. But this month, it's been all festivals. We've got the wine festival next weekend, and getting back to where Good Beer Festival was in Pemberton Park in Salisbury. The Wine and Beer Festival is next Saturday and Sunday. The following Friday and Saturday is Booby Q at the Indian River Inlet down on Route 1. The following week is Saturday is
Short Craft Beer one.
Short Craft Beer one.
It's crazy. Huh?
So some were just, it cuts us too short trying to have classes when we're out at festivals. So we'll start back in November with classes again for both beer and wine.
Very cool. So now to the news. One of the things that I want to talk about early on, unless you have something particular that you want to talk about, is there was a story here about the takeaways from the Great American Beer Festival, Good American Beer, which we
had some of our judges who had been there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Greg Christmas, who was the main BJCP judge, he'd been out there to judge.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were 7,000 entries that were.
That's insane.
I think it was 3 days he judged. And
how do you because beer guys don't spit the beer out the way the wine guys do, right?
They can. Yeah, they have every table, and whether I think most of them drink it,
right?
But you may get in your glass, a quarter of a glass, which you get that much to taste, maybe.
Right.
And you take one taste, maybe that's all you need. If it's really good, you may taste it again, or if it's really bad, you may taste it again. But whatever's left, there's a dump bucket always to dump that
you don't want.
Right.
So, actually, let me ask you about this because you tasted beer before. When I was trying to get people at the Seaford event to try beer, I was saying don't sip it like it's wine. Take a swallow, right? Beer, you need more beer than you need wine to get a sense of if you like it.
Yes, but you can't take too many tastes, or you get too intoxicated.
But as like the amount that you have in there, like
probably
an ounce or more than just a sip, because people are just taking very little sips, and I don't think you can. I like to take a big drink, not to guzzle it, but maybe an ounce, maybe 2 ounces.
Generally, you look at it. You'll smell it to see what it smells like, and then you'll take a taste of it. And as with wine, you usually swish around in your mouth to fully coat your mouth and your palate, and then you swallow it and taste it. So,
and so out of the Great American Beer Festival, there were 3 trends that we've been talking about already, and I don't think that they're shocking trends, but I did want to talk about them a little bit only because one is particularly interesting to me about here. Is that coffee beers that aren't stouts, and you guys already have one, right? Yep.
Our coffee saison, which I guess that was a year ago. I think by now we already had made one, so we were part of the beginning of the trend, I guess.
So that's I like the idea of that as a trend only because people are just kind of shaking off what they've come to believe about dark beers and light beers, and the coffees. There's just no better example of it.
I think coffee is dark when it's brewed, so you associate that as what the final product is going to taste like, which has been the case with going into porters and stouts. But the coffee saison is light, even though it's got great coffee flavor.
And one of the we tried one last week too. The Rail Ale Revival, RAR did a coffee thing, and that also wasn't dark. So the idea of coffee beers that aren't dark and just using the coffee for flavor is apparently something that they picked up as a trend at the Great American Beer Festival. More fruit beers, which is another one, and I don't have any hate for fruit beers. They're not my favorite.
But it's just not fruity wheats. It's other types
cherries
of fruit, right?
And all of these. One of the things that I think is interesting about that, especially, is in light of what we were talking about last week. Last week we talked about people discovering different hops or trying to discover different hops. And as fruit, like if you're spending more time replacing the, I don't know, the citrus hop with an actual, let's say, lemon, right, or a grapefruit or whatever, you know, now that fruit is just a little bit more accepted in larger quantities, you can do more with the hops underneath that anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, you're talking about grapefruit. I think some of the hops themselves, it may be hard to tell whether it's actually the grapefruit that's been added that you're tasting, or is it the hop you're tasting. And maybe there may not be any grapefruit in there, even though it's called grapefruit.
Right. It could just be the hops. And
yeah.
As they're experimenting with these new hops, that's just another layer of
Right.
of opportunity, I guess, to try different things. And last but not least, the re-rise of the lager, which we've talked about a couple times here.
Yeah.
But I love to see. Lori was telling me that they did a Pilsner at Third Wave a while ago, but they haven't done one recently. That would be cool to see more of them.
The problem for the craft brewing industry for doing lagers is it takes 2 or 3 times as long. They're tying up a fermenter or a conditioning tank for an extended period of time, where they need that tank space for other beers coming through. With lager breweries, they have a whole lot more tanks because of the extended time it takes to make that.
Yeah, that's always been kind of a concern, is that you can't, if you don't have the space, unless you can, I guess you can lager in kegs, but that seems also, you still need the space for the kegs,
right?
And you also still need the
but
cold.
Usually it's not kegged until after it's been lagered. So, but my thing on lagering highly hopped ales is you're tasting the hops more than, I know the malt profile usually comes through on some of the lagers, but if you're highly hopping it, that malt profile is not coming through, and you're back to more or less what you had with an ale.
Right.
So.
And actually, I wanted to ask you about that, because we were talking, I guess we've talked a couple times about it, but I remember last week saying that, you don't want to store a hopped beer because,
well, especially one that's very aromatic, because got those great flavor. It diminishes over time, so as time marches on, you're losing flavor and aroma.
And so, what do you do when you're trying to make a highly hopped lager? Do you add that late, or do you just?
I've never made a highly hopped lager, because we usually do ales.
Right.
The lagers we usually make, and when we make them, which is rare, but summertime we usually will make a Pilsner, which is fairly well hopped, but not by American IPA standards.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see, because I'll bet in the spring we're going to see a couple, and we'll be able to kind of judge from there. I haven't tried. And that was actually the next story, I guess, on the list, was the highly hopped.
But I think if most people say they make Pilsners because they're crisper and cleaner. If you're adding lots of hops to it, the crisp and clean
is going to go away. Yeah, you're going to get that thicker taste.
You get more hop and hop aroma, and hence you don't really, the malt characteristics don't come through because you've over hopped everything. So,
the other
thing, to each their own.
You drink what you like and be happy. Right.
Exactly.
Checking to see, we have no comments just yet, so we will continue to cruise right along. The next thing I wanted to talk about was our friends over at Kieran finally bought a craft brewery. We were just talking about this the other day. Kieran in Japan is one of their largest beer companies, and it just bought a chunk of Brooklyn Brewery in Brooklyn.
I think they're being very interactive in trying to promote their business, including they've bought a couple brew pubs to do different things in-house and provide different craft beer possibilities, not just the normal lagers that have traditionally been made in Japan.
And what we said a couple weeks ago, in case you didn't hear that show, was one of the things that their Japanese breweries are kind of maxed out in their own markets, so they're trying to find a way to keep from getting bought by Bud and Miller as they continue to kind of battle around the world picking up breweries. And Asahi and Kirin are the two the two main Japanese brands, and they've been trying to buy up craft beer breweries as well. But this is more of a way to stay relevant and to stay funded because the return on a craft brewery. And I like Brooklyn beer. I don't know if you've had any of the beers.
Yes, I have.
I like they do a Pilsner. That's
They make a stout that's outstanding.
So I mean,
but I think it's good for Brooklyn beer because it sounds like everything's going to stay the same. It's just they're going to get infusion of cash, which is going to help them build a bigger brewery.
And then and then Kieran will use the returns on that investment to at least protect itself and to grow in its own market, which is perfectly cool.
Yeah. I was surprised that I guess they're going to build it in New York. I thought maybe they'd build it somewhere on the West Coast to make things easier to ship.
To ship to Japan. Yeah. I don't know, and I don't know how much. I wonder whether they'll just bring if they're going to brew Brooklyn beers, maybe they'd be better off sending a brewer to Japan and.
But you've got Sierra and Fat Tire who've made East Coast breweries to reduce shipping costs.
Right.
You'd think Brooklyn would still brew in the same thing they have now, continue that, but have a place out west, which would reduce their shipping costs and also allow shipping to Japan to be easier. So,
but that's what I'm saying. Maybe ship directly, like maybe build a brewery in Japan. Yeah. That would be super cool. And I mean, I don't want to be too dismissive of the Japanese, but I think a Brooklyn brewery in Japan would be an awesome place to visit. Yeah. I think that they would have lots of kooky things,
Well, maybe they're doing that already in the two brew pubs. They're brewing beers that Brooklyn beer would be serving.
Right. So we'll see, and as always, we will continue to follow this story as it develops. So the other thing is there was a cool story. There's one every year. I always say I'm going to write one. There are two things that I say about Halloween. The first is that I'm going to come up with an awesome costume. And the second is that I'm going to do a story about pairing beer and candy. And I always forget to do both until Halloween is upon us. So I'll probably just end up being a pirate or a zombie. Those are my two go-to.
I like your point. Buy the candy that you like so that you have something that you can
compare against.
Yeah, compare it against, or you're going to consume with a beer you're going to like.
Right. And so we're asking you, and I don't know if have you ever paired candy and beer? Is that
no? But I like your Whoppers.
Yeah, I'm dying to see what's going to go with the
Whoppers with a stout. That sounds really good.
So
you get your malt two ways. You get it in your candy and you get it in your beer.
Right. And so one of the things I was wondering was like maybe a kind of a counterpoint beer, like what would go well with a malt candy besides more malt? Like I don't want to get a sour beer, so I don't know particularly, but it'd be worth trying. Maybe go to a.
To me, sours wouldn't go well because you got sweet candy and the sour, but every time you take a taste, you'd have a different. Yeah. Sweet sour, maybe, but I'd rather have sweet.
Yeah, well, what I'm thinking that might be worth it, and you again try this at home. Yeah. Maybe take a fistful of Whoppers or whatever your candy is, but I want Whoppers, and go to a brewery and just get like 3 flights, and just like drink the beer, have the candy, drink the beer, have the candy, and then you'll have a. Then you have
what you really like. Yeah.
And then you don't have to get completely, you don't have to be all in. It's funny. I find myself, it's pretty rare that I get a flight anymore because I want to taste the whole pint. I would rather have, 2 or 3 pints and taste the whole thing than have, but I think this is a good excuse to get a flight of beer and drink a fistful.
Any excuse will do.
Yeah. Right. I guess it doesn't have to be a big deal. In the wastewater news, this was a fun story. Did you get a chance to read this?
A new use for stuff that's coming out of the brewery.
Right. Go ahead.
It's the bad beer or whatever the cleaning chemicals and whatever is left from the brewing process. They found a use for making batteries, or some kind of a fungus that actually works on the effluent coming out of the brewery. And making something they're going to use for making batteries.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
But that's great. I mean, hey, that's true recycling. to get something that's useful out of something that you were going to throw away.
Right, and one of the things that I think I may have mentioned in the story, but if not, I'll mention it now, is this stuff comes from breweries as often as anything else. Like if there's a way to waste one less drop, a brewer is going to figure it out because it's better for them. They're crazy about waste, and so they try to find different cool ways. And we've seen people using.
I think the normal rule of thumb is for every gallon of beer they make, they use about between 3 and 4 gallons of water to make that 1 gallon of beer. So
right, and so
it's a lot of cleaning.
And actually, I was at a distillery this week. I spoke about it last week. I went to Baker Distillery in Laurel, and he waters his lawn with his.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he has his stills hooked up to his hoses, and so all the water that he uses in the brewing process that boils off, he squirts out onto his lawn. So I guess he has to cut the grass more often now. I guess is the downside.
Or it's really this week. It's been really
right. And
no matter what, you've got a lot of water standing.
Well, that was always a problem with the idea of trying to use wastewater here. One of the difficulties that they have is the two main difficulties for many counties, especially out here in rural Maryland anyway, is they have a drought problem and they have a wastewater problem, but they can't seem to match them up because the farmers only want the water when they want the water, and I don't blame them. They don't, there's no place to store it when there's no drought, but when there is a drought, it would be nice to be able to get them that water quickly.
But I know even the not only the farmers and the breweries or the sewage treatment, the chicken processors here have fields that they use for their effluent too. So and I mean, wastewater is a big problem. So anyway, and I know Dogfish has been trucking it to our farms for the last 10 years and pumping it onto the farms.
Wow.
So, I mean, they've got to get rid of the water somewhere.
Right. And I mean, at least they're putting it to good use.
Right. And the town couldn't take or didn't want to take all of their effluent.
Right. And last but not least, we have another recipe up this week. Are you a fan of baba ganoush? It's one of my
don't remember snacks. Ever having it. But it sounded good.
Oh, so it's made with roasted eggplant?
Yeah, I saw that.
Just made some, but we didn't put any beer in it, so we're going to have to make more. The idea of adding a wit beer is one of the things that is cool about baba ganoush is it is a little sharp. It's almost, I guess, because of the garlic, it's got this kind of astringent undertone, and I think a wit beer would kind of bring that out and then soften it at the same time. So the next time you make baba ganoush, use this recipe. Good.
Okay, so I see pita in the background. Does that mean you take the pita and you dip the baba ganoush out with the pita? Yes. Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, this is a dip. Yeah. It's like hummus except with eggplant instead of chickpeas. It's got the tahini in it, and it's got lemon and, in this case, wit beer. And this I've never had it with mint or yogurt. So those are all the things you can try. If you have any recipes that you use or that you like, send them along. We'd love to share them. I try to dig up a recipe every week. I found this great website is beerandbrewing.com, which I haven't used yet. I don't know if it's new or if I just recently stumbled across it, but they always have a good recipe or two, and they always have some fun homebrew things and a couple of beer culture things. So
this recipe you need to bring a little sooner in the season though.
Right, because
August,
we just
September.
used the last of our
I know us too.
So we'll get everything
year.
organized. Yeah, maybe we'll put out the Extreme Brewing Beer with Strangers cookbook.
And one thing I just learned, we grew eggplant this year, and I had plenty for us to eat. We sauteed a lot of it and went into different Italian dishes. But I found out that use them as soon as you can. Use them early. Otherwise, the skins get really tough on them.
Right.
So not that you can't use them. And we've been taking, as they've matured, you cut the skin off the outside, but the seeds get bigger inside. So if they're big enough, harvest them and use them soon.
As soon as you can. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I'll encourage you to look up that we do with the ones with the thicker skins is it's called a miso eggplant, and it's a Japanese dish with like honey and soy sauce, and you like cut into and you soak it. So you soak the eggplant in this soy sauce and
So
honey.
it softens the skins?
No, it just gets into the meat.
Oh, okay. And you scoop the meat out?
You sear it on the grill.
Ah,
and it turns
okay.
into almost like a crusty.
Oh, okay.
It's very good. And
yeah, it does sound good.
And that's eggplants with Doug and Tony.
Yeah.
So if you need to find us, you can find us on the internet. You can find me at my name backwards, OSSURYNOT, and through shorecraftbeer.com. And you can find Doug and the recipe for the cider that we tried this and for all the other beers at extremebrewing.com with an X or with
an E.
Either way it works.
E or an X. Extremebrewing.com.
I'm going to get it right next time. It's extremebrewing.com. If you want to have a class and you have some friends and you want to arrange to have a private class, you can do that. They like to have please 4 or more people. And it's a fun way to spend an afternoon. You want to arrange that well in advance, though, because as we mentioned earlier, it's getting a little bit busier here. And I think that's all we have for this week. So drink what you like and be happy. All right. Thanks, folks.